Thank you very much. My name is Ashiq Anjum. Sorry, and I'm Professor of Distributed System at University of Derby. So I will have three parts in this talk. First, I will be talking about IoT, and then would be explaining a particular problem with IoT. So that how we stream data, how we analyze data, and eventually I will be moving towards the edge of IoT, that how can we provide real-time analytics within IoT. That would be my first 40 minutes of talk. Then I would be talking about how can we secure those devices, especially using a novel trust-enabled architecture, for example, blockchains. So I will be having a complete kind of a talk, second part of this talk, onto blockchains. How can we assure trust? How could we assure compliance? How we can ensure provenance, traceability? So all these aspects I will be talking in the second half of the talk. And especially I will be taking a more medical problem, where I will be explaining few use cases as well. The third part of the talk would be, I would be introducing you to new kind of analytical architectures, analytical approaches, and how basically artificial intelligence could be used to a kind of analyze and produce new kind of insights and patterns. So, and in that I would be giving examples from different domains. So now the problem is, my most examples would have nothing to do with agriculture. So it would be from other domains. I would be giving few examples from smart cities, from security, cyber security perspective. I would be talking about mostly from rail. There was an example of rail, but I will be going deep into that as well. Healthcare, I will be talking about. Scientific analysis, I will be talking about. So I will be talking about 6, 7, 8 different applications, but none of those would be from agriculture. Probably I am the least knowledgeable in agriculture, so please excuse me if you discover that I'm talking something nonsense or rubbish at some point of time. Yeah.
Ashiq Anjum, dağıtık sistemler alanında profesör. Yapacağı sunum da nesnelerin interneti dünyasında siber yönetim, gözetimle ilgili 3 kısmı olacak sunumunun. İlk kısmı IoT nesnelerin internetiyle ilgili. Nesnelerin internetiyle ilgili anlattıktan sonra bir problemi detaylı ele alacak. Ve kullanımıyla nasıl analitik karar verilebilir, onu özetleyecek. İkinci bölümü, bu aletler nasıl güvenlikli hale getirebilir, nasıl daha güvenli sistem yaratabilir? Burada da blockchain'den de bahsedecek. Güven ve izlenebilirlik burada önemli meseleler. Bir medikal problemle ilgili de örnek verecek. Üçüncü bölümünde de yeni analitik konfigürasyonlar nedir ve nasıl öngörü ve karar desteği yaratır? Örnekleri tarımdan farklı örnekler olacak. Onun için özür dilerim diyor. Siber güvenlik olacak, bilimsel analizler olacak, akıllı şehirler olacak, sağlık olacak gibi.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So if you start reading literature, that what is an Internet of Things, so you would find a lot of number of different definitions. There's not a standard, a kind of well-established or generally a kind of well-agreed upon definition of IoT. So, but after a lot of kind of reading, so eventually I found my own definition. So that, so this is a kind of, broadly speaking, IoT is. The IoT is where the digital world meets the physical world. So if you have a car and you put some digital device inside that, and that car basically start doing automated navigation, you are basically into a kind of a territory of basically IoT. So if you have basically a kind of a smart camera sending videos to a data center, and you are intelligently analyzing those videos, basically that device or that camera is an IoT basically device. So if you have basically a smart kind of device, it could be a bus for example, it could be a train, it could be a motorway actually. So where basically we put digital devices or electronic devices within physical atmosphere and try to capture data and then stream that data for the analysis, this is what we say is IoT. So, and now it may not be connected to internet. So this is, I mean, most of the IoT devices are essentially not connected to internet. So they may be connected, they may not be connected. So internet is nothing to do with the internet that we have in normal use actually. So eventually everything would be internet enabled, but the current a kind of infrastructure or architecture of IoT, mostly due to security, due to trust, due to compliance, due to regulation reasons, they are not connected to internet actually. So now I try to find a few basically statistics. So there are basically right now around 200 billion kind of devices right now. So, and there are basically 30 billion autonomously connected things. Things could be refrigerators, smart homes, anything like that. So, they are being used in public sector. For example, your electricity, your gas could be IoT enabled to basically, even your smart meters are IoT enabled. So, your smart meters that are basically taking readings every minute or second or hour, that's basically a kind of IoT device. So, this could be basically into logistics, that could be consumer goods, that could be supply chain. So there could be all basically around that. So there are 30 billion autonomously connected things. So, and they are basically generating 3 million petabytes of basically data. So, and they are, so roughly this is that around $10 trillion worth of business value is there. So, and so this is even further would go up. So especially 5G is coming. So 5G is going to generate terabits per second. So now some countries have already started to deploy. So and each and every basically element would become internet enabled. So bandwidth would not be a limiting factor. So essentially, whatever we could foresee would connect us basically to internet. Now we would be generating more data. We would have to store more data. But then we would have to process more data as well. Otherwise that data would remain data until and unless we are not able to process them. So, this is the current stage. So, there are 6,000 exabyte of data that's forecast that would be generated through Internet of Things. I mean, this is huge data. Probably in our lifetime, we have not seen or touched even 1 petabyte. So there are 6,000 petabytes of, exabyte of data that's being generated. We could only process 12% at the most, including all genomics data, including all high energy physics data, even YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you could name, we could only process basically 12% of data. 88% of data still we cannot process. And you know, this number is going up. This maybe in next year we would not be 88 actually, we would be 90 or 92 because we are generating more data, but we don't have the capacity to process that data for intelligent or basically a kind of novel way of doing business or novel way of finding basically a kind of information. So it means with passage of time, we are becoming naive about our own businesses. We don't know what we are basically doing actually. So, and especially with 5G or with the new kind of devices that's coming, and there's a pressure to make basically a kind of, for example, in UK or in the Western world, what they're doing is they're trying to cut people. So there will be less people doing things and there are more automation coming on. So, for example, if you go from London to Manchester, every piece of motorway is being basically sensor enabled. So it means that there will be new sources of data coming, and especially smart cars. There's a huge revolution coming. So this thing would be going up actually, not coming down. So now, for example, just one scenario. So in UK, there are a kind of 6 million cameras, and there is a camera for every 11 people. Every person gets videos 300 times a day. 300 times a day. So most basically monitored country in the world. And in London alone, basically, there are 1 million plus cameras. Just in London alone. So, and I'm not talking about the cameras that we could do for livestock monitoring or farm monitoring or other kind of things, or remote sensing and for crop productivity. I'm not mentioning those numbers. So just for people monitoring or infrastructure monitoring, we have basically, or the Britain has 6 million cameras. Now, if each and every camera starts sending data to a data center in a cloud, so no cloud would be able to absorb that data, because each camera is generating terabytes of data. So I will be giving some numbers of how much data we were generating. So UK does not have the capacity to even capture the data that these are generating, let alone process that. So because the storage cost is too much, the processing cost is too much, the streaming cost actually moving from source to destination is too much. So, and this process would basically further grow because we are having high definition cameras. The resolution of cameras is going up. So even basically this problem from the computational perspective, this looks like a small problem, but this becomes a bigger and bigger problem.
So let me translate.
Okay, please.
Okay. IoT literatürüne baktığımız zaman farklı tanımlar olduğunu görüyoruz diyor Ashiq. Kendi tanımımı yarattım. O da şu şekilde: IoT, dijital dünyanın fiziksel dünya ile buluşması. Örneğin arabaya navigasyon cihazı taktığım zaman akıllı kamerayla videodan veri yaratıyorum ve veri merkeze görüntülü yollanıyorsa bu IoT'nin bir kullanım alanı. IoT'de aslında aletlerin internete bağlı olma zorunluluğu yok. Bağlanabilirler ama böyle bir zorunluluk yok. Bazen de güvenlik, uyum sorunları, güven nedeniyle bağlanamayabiliyor. 212 milyar araç gereç var, 30 milyar otonom bağlı şeyler yaratılmış durumda. Bunlar tüketici ürünleriyle, taşımayla, kamu sektörüyle ilgili olmak üzere çeşitlilik gösteriyor. 300 milyon petabit veri yaratıyor. Bu da 8.9 trilyon değerinde, dolar değerinde iş değerine karşılık geliyor. Band genişliğinin sorun olmayacağını söylüyor. 6000 exabit data yaratılacak bu sene IoT kullanımı ile. Fakat bunun maksimum %12'sini kullanabiliyoruz. %88'ini henüz kullanabilecek, işleyebilecek kapasitede ve altyapıda değiliz. Bütün bu kullanımın içine Facebook vesaire gibi medyalarda dahi belki ilerleyen zamanlarda bu %12 artabilir. Özetle kullanabileceğimizden, işleyebileceğimizden çok daha fazla veri üretiyoruz. Ama bu hızda işleyip iş yaratma olanağına henüz sahip değiliz. Örneğin Londra'dan Manchester'a giderken ulaşım kanallarında IoT ile yeni veriler geliyor, ekleniyor. Dolayısıyla veri yaratma hızı gittikçe artıyor. Şu anda 6 milyon kamera var ve her 11 kişiye bir kamera düşüyor İngiltere'de. Herkes datayı veri merkezlerine satmaya kalksa bunları işlemek mümkün olmayacak. Henüz datayı saklama, bir yerden bir yere iletme ve işleme maliyetleri yüksek düzeylerde.
Yeah, so now, we have, for example, new smartphones are coming. So yesterday, Huawei introduced a new 5G enabled phone actually, and they would be having far more new features. We have new type of laptops, mobile devices, tablets, cameras. So currently, basically, we think that out of all the data that we have, 66% is video data. That was basically roughly in 2015. But by 2019, this year, we anticipate that 71% of all the data will be video data. So Cisco suggested that there is a report from Cisco that basically we are generating around 24.3 exabytes per month, and out of 24, 17 is around video data. So it means that bulk of data is becoming a video data, and as we move along, 80% of all the data that we generate, 80% would be imaging or video data. But are we spending enough research and development activity in that area? No. Only 5 to 10% people or research is going on to just process video data. Most of them is basically non-video and non-imaging data. So, but future is basically video enabled. Future is image enabled. Future is more kind of cognitive.
So, and this is what I will be trying to cover. So now let's look at another scenario. If you are on a highway, I mean an agency, and there are basically a few hundred cameras while coming from Istanbul airport to here. So mostly there would be one person sitting in a control room, sitting in front of 220 or 30 screens. But mostly our cognitive limitation is 2 minutes actually. After 2 minutes we lose focus. We cannot concentrate. But if this poor man is basically sitting in front of 20 screens, looking into 20 different objects, obviously this person would not be able to do anything actually. So, and especially if you are into smart cities or large scale monitoring where you are basically monitoring each and every activity, and in more precisely if you are into sensitive areas, cyber surveillance for example, so it means you are losing a lot of information because your human operators are unable to basically process a lot of information. So, and if you want to scale up so that for each camera you have basically a person, so this costs a lot. So 1 million cameras, how many operators you will need actually? You cannot employ 1 million operators. You cannot even employ even 100,000 operators. You cannot even employ 10,000 operators because that would be costing millions of pounds actually. So the cost is a big area. Even if we could basically bring in the data and we have the means to basically kind of see it, but unless we have automated means to process that data, or algorithms or intelligent kind of analytics are working behind the scenes to process that data, no amount of human operators or number of operators would be able to process this information. So, having said that, so I mean here, so I will be explaining that how we are moving towards that automated processing. So we started with, essentially, people used to have programmers, C++, Java, simple basically a kind of algorithm and data structures. Then almost 2002, 2003, almost 15 years back, people start talking about big data. So where you have data lakes, cloud data centers, Hadoop MapReduce, you're pushing a lot of data streams. Okay, you could store that data, but still you need to basically, even if you have a Hadoop infrastructure, you have a big data cloud. So still you will not be able to process that data. Then people started basically talking about kind of, can we basically have apps and all those kind of applications where we could have a limited amount of information, limited amount of text processing capability. But this is where, I mean, a kind of, the future is going, where how can we basically enable algorithms to think and process the same way humans are doing? Can we basically transfer some of the intelligence that humans have to algorithms? So the algorithms should be able to reason, to argument, to basically a kind of process the information historically that humans have been doing. So this is basically a kind of, there is a lot of information going on and research going on. For example, you would have heard about IBM Watson, for example, or a lot of recent developments into deep learning. Deep learning is even becoming old as well. Now people are starting about reinforcement learning. So, and especially robotics and all those new community and especially edge computing. So automatically this area would be basically developing over the last 10 years. So if not 10, I'm guessing 10 is a long time in research, 2 to 3 years I would say. Yeah. So cognitive computing. Now how can we bring basically, now cognitive computing is, or the cognitive thinking is what humans think actually. We have cognitive ability. If I have a piece of information, another piece of information, I would be able to piece together, create a story. This is how forensics applications work. This is how basically a kind of unknown, a kind of, I mean, we do trend analysis, we correlate things. So, having said that, so one question was, can we make a city safer by utilizing cognitive analytics, for example? So, and here, for example, we have Internet of Things, we have information flows, we have intelligent computing, and we have collaborative response modeling different from different agencies. So, one of the applications, rather this is basically smart city or safer cities, or one of the basically a number one research problem in whole Europe actually. So Europe is spending probably the most amount of money and resources into smart cities. And if you look what they are doing behind the scenes is, they are finding basically use or applications of artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, supercomputers, to some extent infrastructure, and basically bringing all that information together so that humans-like behavior could be embedded within algorithms, and algorithms are processing information like humans are processing. So now, obviously it's just not the safety aspect, it's the utility aspect as well, because every utility, it could be gas, it could be electricity, it could be water, so that are basically becoming smart meters as well. You could basically bring that into the system. Even transport is becoming smart as well, so you could basically monitor each and every segment of the traffic. So all those informations could be basically a kind of embedded into the information, into the data center, and we would be saying that we are doing cognitive analytics. So it's not just one source of information, rather basically consolidated and integrated information across the sectors. So yeah, so I found a slide somewhere, so I thought that I should be able to kind of explain it in a more better way. So here basically previously people had basically a kind of skill set into spotting patterns in data and basically assessing threats. Then we started using basically security intelligence to expand information and scan and basically a kind of employ high value people who have a lot of knowledge. But now the time is coming where basically there would be a collaboration between man and machine. So now how? So and this is not by the way just into security. It has exactly the same case actually. So, for example, have you heard about rebellion example recently? So, for example, if I have an algorithm and I train that algorithm based on my information and it's giving me 70% correct results. But what about the remaining 30%? So most of the results basically could go up to 60%, 70%, even 80%. But the real value is on the remaining 20 to 25%. And most of artificial intelligence or deep learning algorithms fail in that. A new class of basically a kind of machine learning and AI algorithm is coming where we learn from algorithms and algorithms learns from humans actually. And this is basically man and machine kind of thing. So for example, if you are a doctor and you have basically 50,000 basically eye scans and you have to basically see that how your, the effect of diabetes is having on eyesight, because most of the eyesight losses are due to diabetes actually. So now we could get up to 50% results because we would never have unlimited data. To have algorithms that behaves 100% right, we would have basically many hundred millions of patients, so that we could feed that information to the algorithms, but we will never be having that number. So, assumption is that most of deep learning algorithms would fail. All people who are doing deep learning research would eventually resort to some other kind of basically analytic algorithms. So, and this is where basically what we were saying is a new type of domain is coming, what we say reinforcement learning. So in third part of my talk, I will be explaining more about that, what is the difference between the deep learning and the reinforcement learning. But for the time being, I would simply move on, and I will be saying that how basically people influence algorithms and how algorithms basically capture human knowledge to basically kind of get to the next level. So because we have far more knowledge than algorithms have. So for example, we have read hundreds of books, and collectively we have read thousands of books. Algorithms don't know that actually. If we could basically transfer a lot of those basically kind of information sources into algorithms, so instead of algorithm reading from the data, that would be a revolution. And this is where we are heading to actually. So whoever basically gets, obviously we are not yet there, we are not even 30% there yet. So, but this is where kind of we will be working on.
Evet, videoda veri patlamasından bahsetti. Şu anda daha iyi çözünürlük, daha yüksek bit oranları var. Ancak gelecekte video verisi toplam verinin %71'ini oluşturacak. 24 egzabitlik'in 17'si de video verisinden oluşacak diyerek siber yönetim, siber gözetime geçti. Bir kontrol merkezinde bir kişi 20-30 ekranı ancak 2-3 dakika takip edebilir ya da ancak 1-2 ekranı takip edebilir. Oysa orada çok daha fazla ve çeşitli veri var. Dolayısıyla bütün bu verinin bir insan tarafından takip edilmesi, işlenmesi çok zor, neredeyse imkansız. Bu nedenle de bu görüntülemelerden birçok bilgi aslında bu şekilde kaybediliyor. Hiçbir insan bunu tek başına işlemleyemez, işlem göremez. Dolayısıyla teknoloji eğilimleri burada önemli. Programlamadan başlayan teknoloji eğilimi daha sonra büyük veriyle ve bulutla devam etti. Şimdi gelinen nokta kognitif algısal işleme, özellikle son 10 yıldır bu konu gelişmekte ve önem kazanmakta. Burada önemli olan insanın düşünme biçimini algoritmalara yükleyebilir miyiz ya da ne kadarını yükleyebiliriz? Derin öğrenme, robotik gibi alanların da burada devreye girmesi söz konusu. Farklı bilgileri bir bakış açısından birleştirebilme aslında yapılması gereken. Örneğin bu sayede şehri daha güvenli yapmak. Şehir örneğinde bağlantılı city'den güvenli city'ye, hatta buradan sensörlerle, algıyla yönetilen akıllı city'ye, şehre geçiyoruz. Avrupa'dan bu konuda yapay zeka, akıllı altyapılar, algoritmalar insanların işlediği şekilde işlem yapmaya daha yaklaşıyor. Tek kaynaklı değil, daha konsolide bilgi gelmesi söz konusu. Proaktif siber gözetimde de önce siber savaşçısı olarak başlayan süreç, paternleri, verideki paternleri yakalamak, bir takım sakıncaları ya da işte tehditleri görebilme olarak başlayan süreç daha sonra siber analizle devam etti, güvenlik zekası ile devam etti ve siber zeka şu anda gelinen süreç. Önemli olan insan ve makine işbirliğinin yaratılması. Algoritmalar tek başına insanın yaptığını yapamaz, insanlar da algoritmasız bütün bu süreçleri düzenleyemez. Dolayısıyla önemli olan ikisinin işbirliği ve %100 doğru algoritma diye bir şey olmayabilir. Bunun olması için aslında yüz milyonlarca denemenin yapılması lazım. Algoritmalar örneğin bizim okuduğumuz yüzlerce kitapla ilgili tüm bilgiyi, veriyi dahil edemiyor olabilir. Önemli olan algısal bir yaklaşımla ikisinin birleştirilebilmesi.
Can I get a small question on there? What about the privacy, morals, the ethics on there? Because you said like since algorithms will process everything up, and we need to be controlled by the machines to be controlled by the human. In order to control that amount of data, you mean it's going to be like around, let's say, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 10 million, 50 million people? So it may need that much privacy will be problematic in future, do you think?
Oh,
you comment on that?
Yes, so right. I have a whole talk on that aspect actually. Right. Second part, so I knew that this question would be coming. So, because I would first increase the level of security and then increase basically risk, and then we say how to protect it. And then the third part is to basically analyze that information. Yeah. So basically, this is one aspect. So IoT is essentially captured data. IoT is nothing more than that. So what I will be talking that how we are basically embedding intelligence into IoT. For the time being, the simplicity. IoT is a source of producing data. The second is, once this data comes into basically a kind of a data center, how can we use basically novel algorithms and the processing model to process that. So I have a talk on that as well, so I will be spending a lot of time on a few applications. And then basically how can we enable trust and security, and this is where I will be talking about blockchains here. So yeah, so this lecture is this part only. So yeah, so we had a project from Innovate UK, and the idea was that how can we basically ensure cyber surveillance for IoT-enabled world. So this was number one objective. So we wanted high performance. And second is how can we basically process information, not in minutes, ideally in seconds actually. The third was how can we basically increase operator efficiency. We could cut down operator time, because cutting down operator time is a lot of cost actually. Fourth was that if we increase the scale of video streams from 1 million to 5 million, do we have the infrastructure that would scale up? And the fourth is that can we basically enable normal cameras, off-the-shelf cameras, $5 cameras on the streets to do basically the same level of surveillance and monitoring as basically expensive cameras are doing. For the time being, surveillance cameras cost basically up to 20 to 30,000 pounds actually. So if we could basically having a small kind of surveillance, smart surveillance environment we could basically use normal off-the-shelf cameras or smartphones to have the same kind of infrastructure that we could have through expensive cameras. So having said that, we propose this infrastructure. I will not be spending much time on technology here. So what we do is we, capture videos from a group of cameras. So for example, in the university, we would have basically a kind of recorder, 2 or 3 recorders, and all data basically is coming to that recorder. Why? Because when we started this project, we didn't have 4G even, we didn't have 3G even. So we were basically using very old infrastructure, communication infrastructure. We thought that if the network is lost, then we don't have, we are losing the information. So we said that, okay, we worked with a company and extended the camera's functionality actually, so that basically we could have recording facility within a kind of the cameras. Now, still we are working that, and I will be explaining. So this is no more valid because we have even gone further, and we have started processing device data here instead of sending here. But for the time being, just assume that we had in-transit storage. And eventually we want to use this in-transit storage for in-transit analytics. So instead of sending all the data to a cloud data center, why not we should process data close to a basically the source. For example, if I want to trace, please tell me that particular logistics a kind of courier or logistic company's truck, for example, moving from one place to another. And tell me when this comes to a particular location, generate a log. Now, if I send all the data here and this process here in the cloud data center results goes back, it would be basically 2 to 3 minutes. Because the data transfer cost, data processing cost, and results streaming cost. There are 3 costs associated with that. So, on the other hand, if we could train data here and simply push results here, so our devices would become basically a kind of intelligent devices. So right now what we are doing is we are processing results data here. So for example, 88% to 90% data that we are capturing is mostly static background information. So for example, this camera, if I don't do anything, it stops, simply stops. It would keep capturing the data. So it means I may not be doing anything, but still the data is being captured. So now if only the camera is intelligent, and if there is a movement when I move or when I talk, the camera should only be capturing this. We should not be capturing that. So what would be the advantage? And if this camera is on the road, so it means that 90% of the time no one would be passing through that road actually. It's only 5-10% of the time there would be activity. If we could enable that cameras to basically process information when there is a movement, we have reduced the data size by 90% in just one go. So your question? Yes?
Is that old framework or new framework?
So this is still the old framework. So I will be coming towards basically edge analytics gradually. So when we started this, we did not know that we would be eventually going towards edge analytics. We would be doing processing at the edge or at the source. So but we knew that eventually that would be coming. So what I am talking about, actually it would not have been possible if we did not have this capability. So now, essentially, so we are, obviously we have recorder as well, and then we are pushing those streams to a cloud data center. Now here, we know that, let's suppose 100 cameras are associated to one server. If the cameras become 200, we would add another server. If the cameras become 500, we would have 5 servers. So this architecture is pretty scalable because we know cloud is scalable. Google has 10 million data servers. Amazon has basically more than 5 million plus servers. So Facebook has millions of servers. So we know that cloud is scalable by definition. So if we could link basically our IoT environment with our cloud storage, and we could have basically managed streams, it means that we could have a kind of large scale, basically scalable IoT analytics systems. So, but obviously, we cannot directly send it to this because the network in between is not reliable. We don't have 5G for the time being, for example. Yes, 5G is claiming to be basically redundant, 5G is claiming to be resilient, 5G is claiming to be a kind of reliable infrastructure. But 4G, 3G, and all other even fiber optics basically we have basically bottlenecks because we are relying on intermediate routers and switches actually. So yeah, so what happens, for example, so we capture a video streams and here each video streams is allocated to a different machines actually. So and then here, so when we are capturing a video, so each basically second we are capturing 30 frames per second. It means there are 30 frames or 30 images each second. Okay, so first thing is to basically decode. So decode is essentially to break that video into images, because we cannot find out individual images or individual objects until we have decoded it, or until we have basically decompressed essentially. So what we do is, so first is on each individual machines we decode the video. So here we produce individual objects and then we push it into frames buffer. And this is where basically, so for example, then we have a GPUs. So now if we have 5-second video, we would have 150 frames because each second is detecting 30. So, and it means that we have 150 images. So to just process one image, it takes considerable time. So this is the reason we are using GPUs. Now on computer, we have 4 processors. On GPUs, we have 5,000 processors. So what we have done is, we have pushed GPUs into servers so that we could parallelize it. It means on computer, we could process 4, on one machine, we could process 4 images. But on a server with a GPU, we could process up to 5,000 images in one go. Because each GPU is between now 4 to 5,000 NVIDIA GPU, for example. So, but when we started, it was around 3,000 cores, but now we have basically up to 5,000 cores as well. So obviously before we start processing, we have to basically kind of decode those video streams. Decode is decompress, and then basically ask algorithms on each GPU cores to basically start a kind of finding it. Now algorithms could be anything. It could be, for example, in this case, we were tracking people. So when a person is moving from Istanbul airport to here, so we have basically 200 cameras. Each camera is sending the data to a data center, so extracting basically individual objects, and we could say this person was, or this car was at this particular location on this time. This is basically, so we could map a whole trajectory to basically a kind of from the video streams. And now interestingly, so we did it retrospectively. We were, due to security reasons or due to ethical reasons, we had a 2-minute delay. So I would be moving towards the next step. We could do it real time as well. So, and especially if we move a lot of processing towards edge device. So now what we do inside that as well. So we have camera feeds. We detect objects. We are not yet these.
In the previous slide, you showed why you are not using like federative learning. You put the GPUs at the beginning.
No. GPU is towards the lower the stream.
You can update your weights in the server, but you can collect your estimate some segmentation as your recipe. So you can do some segmentation in the cameras themselves. You can use the TensorFlow as a
well, GPU.
So
there are 2 aspects. There are 2 aspects. One is data intensive and compute intensive. GPUs are not good for data intensive because we cannot, when decoding process, GPU is not a lot of compute, it's a lot of data actually. So this is the reason this part is not on a GPU. This part is on a GPU because image processing or finding an individual object from a video stream or from a frame is basically compute intensive. But simply breaking a video into individual frames, it's not compute intensive.
You can do the estimation, the first part of the segmentation of the model. Let's say you are using the EGG or you are using the residence models, whatever. Then you can put it in the GPU of the cameras. Let's say you can use a cell phone. Then you have some weights. They call it transfer there. Then you have so you have a weights beginning like initiating weights. Then you have a server. You just collect the weights and update.
Just wait. I'm moving in that direction actually. So for the time being, we are pushing everything. So this was generation 1 that we had. Yeah, so.
Let me have a short translation. Türk tekniği tabii tercüme edemem de çok ana birkaç şey söyleyeyim. Veriye dayalı siber gözetimde 3 ana konudan bahsetti. Dağıtık büyük veri ve analitiği, uçtan uca güvenlik ve IoT ve bu kısımda IoT altyapısından bahsedeceğim dedi. Bundan ilgili bir projeyi özetliyor değil, teknik tarafıyla da detaylı anlatıyor. IoT ortamları için daha iyi video çekimlerinin, video sonuçlarının daha iyi şekilde ölçeklenmesi ve süreç işlenmesinden bahsetti. Pahalı olmayan kameraların kullanılması, internette veri saklama yönteminden bahsetti. Örneğin lojistikte bir kurye geçiyor. Kuryenin geçişinde bir hareketli olan
15 minutes, then we'll have the lunch and then come back.
Programlamayı öyle yaparsak ki duran zamanları hiç çekmeyi sadece hareketlileri kaydedersek bu önemli ölçüde verimlilik ve süreçten tasarruf sağlar. Yaklaşık %88'i statik bilgi zaten bunların dedi ve yapıyı kurarken de eğer 100 kameralı kullanıyorsak tek server gerekiyorsa 500'de 5'e çıkıyor yani. Burada gittikçe server sayısı arttığı için ona göre yapıyı kontrol etmekten bahsetti. 5G'nin daha güvenli olduğu, daha düşük G seviyelerinde 4G'de bunun bir takım problemler yarattığından bahsetti. Saniyede 30 çerçeve, 30 resim çekilebildiğinden bahsetti ve ilk aşama bunu deşifre etmek, videoyu görüntülere ayırmak ve bir görüntüyü işlemek bile önemli zaman alıyor. İşte burada GPU ile yapılanma devreye giriyor. 5000 görüntüye kadar işlenebildiğinden bahsetti. Algoritmayla da hareket eden insanları izleyerek bu kişi bu dakikada ya da bu otobüs, bu araç bu dakikada şuradayı tespit edebilecek teknolojide olduklarından bahsetti. Bunun 2 dakika gecikmeyle yapıldığından söz etti. Bunun bir nedeni de aslında güvenlik nedeniyle aslında gerçek zamanında yapabilecek durumdayız dedi.
Yeah, so what we do is, so we have camera feeds. We then detect individual targets, let's suppose that group of people, that group of cars, that group of trucks, whatever. Then basically you start tracking them, and then we, in the 4th phase, what we do is we calculate the relationship. This is the same person, this is the same car, this is the same basically group of people. So essentially these are 4 steps that we do, and in here what we do is we basically kind of here then once we have linked those individual targets, then we use deep learning here to basically see that okay now here we define, is this a normal behavior or this is an abnormal behavior. So what we do is, from basically we work with psychologists and the human and experts to basically bring a lot of basically psychological and activity data into our classifier. We model and classify to see basically, I mean, is this legitimate or is this a suspicious activity. So, so now situation awareness, where basically humans exactly more or less exactly the same thing that humans do. So we know that if I am walking normally, this is normal behavior. But if I'm in a panic, or if I behave abnormally, or I'm in anger, or I'm basically in a panic mode, so it's abnormal behavior actually. So algorithms obviously need to basically be kind of understanding those kind of semantics or a kind of abnormal behaviors before algorithms could generate alarms. So now we have basically a kind of within that. So I will not be spending a lot of time because most people may not have interest in that. So what we do is we break the individual images into basically kind of layers. So and then we map those layers onto deep learning architecture. So here we do not use any reinforcement learning, it's simple deep learning architecture. So and you could see that basically that we first decompose an image into a frequency domain, and then we basically have a high resolution kind of frames, are low resolution frames. So by the way, we have a paper on that as well. It is published in IEEE transactions, ecosystems, managed cybernetics. A whole kind of paper is there, just published. Rather, we also have a paper on IEEE transactions and cloud computing, was that's published as well. And the third paper that we had in IEEE transactions services computing. So these are very high, kind of very good journals. So we have all the details already available if you're more interested. So what we do is basically we know that higher IMFs. So if we have basically a kind of different kind of frequencies, we know the high quality basically a kind of information is in higher frames. So the lower frames or the basically lower IMFs may not be having a kind of information that we need. So what we do is, because obviously if we start processing each and every IMF, it will have a computational cost. What we do is we take the top two and only 5 frames out of each a kind of stream. So every 2 to 5 minutes we're capturing 5 frames. Because if we want to enable real time a kind of computation, we have to resort to those kind of practices. For example, if I'm moving from this to this place, there is not much change in the same person, I have the same dress, it's not changed much. So why I should be processing each and every information? So if every 2 or 5 minutes, if I'm processing 2 or 3 frames and basically getting the object and basically mapping onto a trajectory, this would save a lot of speed, and this is exactly what we are doing here. So, and what we do is then we use simple, this you could see that MapReduce, but here there's a processing framework known as Spark. Spark works on top of Hadoop. Hadoop is basically a big data framework. Spark is an in-memory framework because if, for example, if we are reading data from hard drive, it's very slow. But if we are reading data from memory, it would be much faster. So what we have done is that we process the information, we store the information on disks, but we process the information in memory to basically have real-time kind of analytics. So I will be presenting very small scale kind of result as well. So this was a machine, for example, each our node is basically, we have 4 virtual machines. We have basically 8 GB RAM. We had a data storage on each machine 100 GB, and we are basically each VCU was 2.4 gigahertz. So we were using basically we generated our own data, and we used basically 2 other databases as well to see that our algorithms work on other databases and not. So we use basically BioID as well as the Yaleface database. By the way, this information is paper, so it's all public information. So we have published 3 very good papers on this, so you could easily find actually. So now you could see that, so even if, for example, there is a light coming, there is a dim, there is a darkness. For example, if a video camera is basically talking in this direction or this direction, or if I switch off the lights or if increase the basically blur, so you could see that basically even if kind of when basically the illumination varies or when basically a kind of variation in the data happens, so algorithms basically kind of can capture those scenarios as well. Because algorithms are more or less emotionless. Algorithms are kind of, you could train them whatever you want actually. If your algorithms can process information, even if it's a dark night or even if basically thunderstorm or something like that, or snow is happening, so cameras may be having different behavior, but when we decompose an image from basically a kind of high resolution to more frequency domain, so at the end of the day this becomes basically zeros and ones, bits and bobs actually. You could process it the way you want. So yeah, so these were our initial results when we started processing. So for example, on CPU, 1 month of data took us more or less 209 hours on just CPUs. But we managed to basically bring down the same into basically a kind of 51.2. So essentially, we have basically a kind of so 1 month of data we managed to process in 2 days essentially on 1 GPU actually. So and we thought that, so this is this is a big kind of despite the fact that video data is very, very time consuming, because first you need to push all the data to GPUs and then process and get back the results actually. So we use different frames. You could see that even full HD we managed to basically achieve a considerable performance, but it was not close to reality. It was not close to real time. So if you want basically real time, so we need to do much more than that. So And so we also did vertical and horizontal scalability. So can we push more videos into a server, or can we add more servers into the data centers? So so basically we were we could increase the number of worker nodes, and we could basically push more workload to each worker node as well. So yeah, so now we could map onto basically a kind of object trajectories as well. So for example, if object is coming in a multiple videos, so can we see that this was location 1, this was location 2, this was location 3. So we could put it this into Google Map as well, essentially. So you could pull that data into Google Map and see that this object was there at this particular time. And now obviously time is a factor, how quickly you could do it, but this is doable. And exactly logistics company, for example. Logistics companies have cameras on their basically a kind of machines or the trucks, and they are basically sending those video streams to back to data center. Data center is almost GPS aside, because you could cheat the GPS. So to some extent, but with the videos you have evidence as well. So, and you could see that how the driver behavior, for example, energy efficiencies, all those kind of things, security. If you have some kind of very sensitive items within your kind of trailer, you could basically do object tracing, which is almost real time. So now, so there were okay.
So where was I? Hedef tespitiyle ilgili süreçten bahsetti. Önce görüntüleri birleştirmek, sonra modellemek ve sınıflandırmak. Böylece normal ve anormal davranış biçimlerini ayırt edebiliyoruz dedi. Semantikleri anlaması algoritmalarla mümkün oluyor. Evet, süreç olarak da derin öğrenmede süreç olarak da görüntüleri katmanlara ayırıyoruz. Katmanları derin öğrenme yapısıyla deşifre ediyoruz. Değişik frekans aralıklarında, örneğin yüksek kaliteli görüntünün daha yüksek frekans oluyor. Bu sayede tüm görüntüleri işlemekle zaman harcamıyoruz. Daha etkili olması açısından en üst iki görüntüyü alıp işliyoruz. Her bilgiyi, her görüntüyü işlemek gereksiz. İşlemeyi de hafızadan yapmak suretiyle daha hızlandırıyoruz. Işık gelmesi, yön farkı, gece gündüz, kar yağması gibi çeşitli olayları algoritmalar tüm senaryoları yakalayabiliyor. CPU ve deneyin sonunda CPU analizi ile yapılan bir aylık verinin işlenmesi 200 saat tutarken GPU ile 51 saat tutuyor. Bir haftalığın CPU ile 48 saatken GPU ile 4.48 tuttuğunu söylüyor. Ayrıca dikey ve yatay ölçeklendirme yapabilmeleri mümkün oldu ve şunları tespit edebildik diyor. Çoklu videolarla nesneyi, belirlediğimiz nesneyi bulunduğu yerde tespit edebildik. Ayrıca nesnenin belli noktalarda ne kadar zaman geçirdiğini de tespit edebilmiş, hesaplayabilmiş olduk diyor.
Yeah, so
sorry, we can stop if you.
I will be just taking 5 minutes and then.
Okay, you are about.
Yeah, so then we would start.
Okay.
So now the same principle that I explained we used into two different applications. So I will be changing application because one idea of this talk was that I should not just stick to one application, I should introduce another application as well. So genome analytics, I will be explaining that how we use the same concept into genome analytics, and then I will be explaining how we use the same basically a kind of concept into predictive maintenance in trains engines. So I will be using the two applications of this research into slightly different areas. So for example, this was the original architecture. I said that I will be coming back to you. So what we were doing is we were pushing all the data, and this was going to data center, being processed, sent back the results. This was, you saw that there was 2 minutes delay at least. So now what happens is that, so if we could basically, now there are millions of devices. Let's suppose I go back to the same example, London. There are 1 billion cameras. If we start processing data on the cameras, we have 1 million computers actually. If in Istanbul there are 5 million cars, for example, you have 5 million computers. You could process data in computers. you don't need to send all the data back to data center, process it, and get back the results. So, and this is where basically the world is heading to. And this is what we say it's in-transit analytics. Another name that you will see in the literature is edge analytics or edge computing. So edge computing or edge analytics versus in-transit analytics, there are certain differences, but you could simply map that onto basically. So what we started doing is that, now, this framework, essentially, we are not building cameras. We helped the company to do something, but cameras was not our own research actually. The framework actually was our research. So we started working with different kind of, when we started presenting research, a lot of applications started coming. We thought there's a lot of research going on that leads this kind of, basically, that has similar problems. How can we help those community to basically make benefit of this? So, for example, LHC experiment is CERN, probably you know what CERN is. CERN for European Nuclear Research. This is in Geneva. So, where high energy physics, all the nuclear experiments are happening. This is world's largest laboratory. WWW, World Wide Web, was invented at CERN. So, in 1989. So, what we have, internet, was invented at CERN actually in 1989. So, and I have a long-standing collaboration. I did my PhD at CERN, and for the last 20 years, I have active collaborations. So, for example, smart grids, for example, genomics, square kilometer array is another, basically, especially people who are scanning the skies. So, for new stars and all. So, all these applications have similar data rates that we have in videos, and we thought that would benefit from in-transit analytics. So, for example, so one thing was, now most of the trains, for example, you know why the trains are delayed? Mostly delays are due to signaling problems. So when there is a signaling issue, train speed reduces to up to 40 miles. And then basically that has a knock-on effect on basically the rest of the train system. So for example, so signal failures basically will limit train speeds to 30 to 40 miles an hour. So the proposal is to build IoT fail-safe system so that I should probably simply explain it. So normally, still they are using basically a kind of GPS-based signaling system. So they have been similar to what we have in military or combination of radars and GPS. But the idea is, now on each camera, on each train, there are a lot of cameras. On tracks, there are cameras. So can we use that information to process the data on trains so that even if basically someone is stuck on the passing, so the trains will automatically detect it on real time so that they should not be reducing speed. Anything happens within the train, it should not be stopping the whole train system. Rather, they should be able to basically kind of manage that even locally. So we have built a basically safety and signaling system. So we have a prototype with Bombardier. Bombardier is based in Derby. So we are using exactly the same mechanism to basically embed intelligence into the trains. The trains are data center actually. If there are 4 bogies, so essentially we could have 40 computers within the train. Now if you have 40 computers, data centers on train, how much data you could process? You could store data locally, you could process data locally. So similarly, another thing is that predictive maintenance. So predictive maintenance is that before you, so for example, what happens is that, so trains or cars or even logistics companies or logistic trailers, they're running round the clock. So what they will do is, they will only be sending a car or a truck or a bus or train to a garage or a depot when they stop working. Otherwise, they will keep on running. So, but if, so for example, if the train is delayed by 1 hour due to some maintenance failure, you know how much it costs? It's 100,000 pounds per hour. So 1 hour costs 100,000 pounds to simple British Railway, for example. So now if we could simply put sensors, so if we could put sensors and IoT on the basically kind of machines within trains or within cars or within the logistics companies and put algorithms, algorithms are being developed by clouds and pushed into basically a kind of devices, so we could process most of the information on the device, on the train. So what would happen is that before basically a kind of we would precisely know that when train or this bus or this truck needs to be sent to a basically depot for maintenance. So what would happen is that it will be a very well-informed maintenance regime. We know when it's going to fail. What are the failure algorithms? And we know that when basically track is deteriorating or the component is deteriorating, we could set a threshold actually. So we are working. There is a company in Derby that's known as Fishbone. So what they do is they use the old fleet from Great Western in UK and basically use this kind of set of algorithms to what they do is they have extended the life by 30% actually. So and their kind of downtime is non-existent because now still a kind of prototype, still we have not deployed at large scale. So the idea is that if we could do it on 2 to 3 trains for a year to see that it works, and especially if you have an old fleet. So normally the lifetime of a rail is more or less 50 to 100 years, sorry, 50 to 70 years actually. So the still British Railway has the trains that were manufactured 50 years back actually. How can you basically use the latest predictive maintenance technique, increase or enhance the lifetime? So that was another application. Now I am going to the third and last application before I stop. So future of personalized medicine. Future is personalized medicine. Where, for example, normally what's happened is that if I have a blood pressure, another person has a blood pressure, we both be given the same medicine. This happens. If one person has disease, another person is disease, doctor would simply prescribe, you would check my blood pressure, sugar levels, XYZ, and say, oh, this I need this drug. But maybe my blood pressure is due to different genetic mutations than other person's. So what happens is that each person has a disease that may be due to family history, that is due to different genetic makeups actually. And this is basically leading to a personalized medicine. So another reason that's coming is 5 years back, the cost of genome processing was $1,000. Now it has come down to almost $50. This is the time when most people can afford basically personalized medicine. For example, Qatar has a whole population genetically basically kind of scanned. UK has a 100 kg project where 100,000 people would be basically a kind of scanned for basically rare diseases, for a kind of genetic makeups, for a kind of characterization of individual genes that lead to particular for the diseases. For example, we know that cancer is a genetic disease, but which are the particular genes that lead to a particular type of cancer? And which is the basically group of people that has this particular kind of cancer. So for example, now people, for example, South Asian women for example have 7 times more risk of having eyesight loss or heart disease than basically European males. What are the different genetic characteristics of that? So blood pressure, sugar or simple diagnosis would not tell us. So we need to have basically a kind of genetic. Now, the problem is, each sequencing machine generates 40 gigabits per second. 40 gigabits per second. And there are almost 7,500 sequencing machines. Do we have the capacity to store that data? Do we have the capacity to generate that data? No, there is a problem. That if a person has a scan in 1 month and the person has scan and next month, it's only less than 1% change. Or even 0.001% change. 99.99% data remains the same. And that's the same with crops, that's the same with animals, whatever the basically mechanism is. So it's nothing to do with simply by the humans. So it means that we are generating a lot of redundant data that we could basically could be avoided actually. So if we could now individual scanning machine or individual sequencing machine, if we could process only the changes that are happening on the virtual machine, on the sequencing machine, so it means we would only be capturing 0.1% of the data. We could simply discard 99% because we know between 1% to another person, 99% data is the same. It's only 1% or 0.1% that's different. So if we know that 99% data is the same, why are we capturing it again and again? So, and that's the biggest cost. You could see that, each sequence in whole genome sequence is 200 GB actually. So, and just multiply it with 100,000 people. So, or if, Turkey has probably 800 billion people. So, you will not be able to store that data. So, whatever the resources you have. And if we link it with animals or crops, obviously that will become so much problem. So the only thing is that the way we should be doing it, we should be processing in transit nodes or on the machines itself, and discard the data that's not needed, because 99% data we capture it once and then we only capture the changes on top of that. So yeah, and interestingly, so there is a forecast, so that by 2025, so I mean you could see that just the genomic data would be 22 exabytes actually. 2025, so it means that it would be far more than YouTube. YouTube will be 8 exabyte by 2025. So genomics data would be 22 actually exabytes, and it would go up because all the countries are becoming conscious, health is becoming personalized, so this trend would continue. So now essentially what they're trying to do is they are basically scanning and a kind of basically based on particular genes, a kind of targeted therapies would be coming. So for example, if we would know that if this group of patients have this kind of genetic mutations, basically this kind of therapy should be prescribed. Now interestingly, if you look at what products are coming from pharma companies, all the research that pharma companies are doing, that would be coming basically in this area actually. So if you look at Roche or AstraZeneca or GlaxoSmithKline, so fortunately most of my research income is coming from pharma companies actually. So, and as a result, I have almost a 10-member team working for different pharma companies, and this is the reason I became aware of these use cases. So I work both, for example, there's a company known as Roche. I work with their Basel office as well as their San Francisco office as well. So, and we have access to data as well as a lot of other resources. So, and I know that the next 5 years, the products that pharma companies are producing would be becoming personalized medicines actually. So because especially the people are becoming health conscious, diabetes would not be a problem. So most of the diabetes companies are shutting their offices down and opening up in Asia because the European or Westerners becoming more health conscious due to better food or better exercise regimes. But the personalized medicine due to aging, for example, aging is dementia, for example. What are the genes that lead to dementia? What are the genes that lead to bowel cancer, for example, or breast cancer, for example? That's a kind of targeted therapy. So, yeah. So, but storage, analysis, and distribution of genomics data are key drivers in pushing in-transit high-performance analytics, because we are producing so much data, we are generating basically, for example, each individual pipeline. So if one person has been scanned and we have sent its genome to HPC facility, before we could get outputs, it takes 12 hours. It takes 12 hours. Now, my last slide, so this is the way we are trying to do it. So it's exactly the same thing. What we do is we break the genomes into individual pipelines, or what we say is individual tiles. So now 99.99% tiles are same. So we capture once, but after that we only store the changes. So the 99.99% basically part in the remaining iterations we simply discard it. And then what we do is we have set up a basically tag library, and then what we do is we map. So essentially, if we look at, we have billions of genes. Okay, billions of genes are interconnected into graphs. So I will be visiting this slide again when I talk about graphs in the later parts of the after the lunch break. So what we do is, so now we know that this gene is associated to this, or you could create a lot of association. Now the problem is, you are capturing data once and you are processing data once. Now, person sitting here, you could read 1,000 times. You don't need to process again. In the pipeline, especially the genomic centers that we are doing is, they are processing each and every pipeline again and again, each and data set again and again. And that takes basically a lot of time. And that's the reason, basically, if you go to a doctor would say that, oh, but it will take a month before your results comes up. Because the computational framework is not there. And you could map this onto any genomic activity. It could be a crop, basically, or it could be animals' genomes, or it could be a wheat, basically, gene, or whatever. So, so what we have done is, so we have more or less, basically, we are writing a paper right now on this one. So most likely, we will be cutting down basically genome processing time from hours to minutes actually. So in the current year. So, and what we are doing is we will be processing data on the sequencing machine, and we will be cutting down the data from basically many hundred of GPs to few megabytes actually. And that's due to in-transit analytics, the same concept that I explained with the video analytics. So, I should also give my credit to Roche and SAP and Microsoft because they are partners with this research as well. So I would conclude. But obviously, this is part one. Still, I have 2 more parts to do. So if there is enough time, So what we need is that we need platforms to autonomously process a lot of data. So we could process a lot of data in transit nodes, and basically we are using different deep learning toolkits like TensorFlow. We could do iterative genome analytics, and we could basically do in-transit analytics to do basically IoT analytics. Now, I gave you 3 different examples: video cameras, sequencing machines, trains, kind of predictive maintenance, and signaling systems. So these are 4 different examples of basically IoT. So what they are doing is we are capturing data for different applications, but using the same platform, we could bring the data into a data center. We could process it either in the data center or at the edge or on the machine itself. So I would continue basically this one to move towards more trust, security, compliance, regulation side, and then third one would be to get into more algorithms and see that how the analytics landscape or AI basically is informing. I have not touched AI at all for the time being, but after break I will be doing that. Thank you.
Yeni yönelimlerde yüksek performanslı genom analitiği ve önleyici bakımdan bahsetti. Uç analitiği ya da intransit analitiğin kullanım alanları, faydalarından bahsetti. CERN nükleer deneylerin, nükleer araştırma merkezi CERN'de, smart büyüklerde ve genomikte bunun kullanıldığını söyledi. Örneğin güvenli sinyalleme ve güvenlik sistemlerine yönelik olarak uçak rötarlarının ağırlıkla sinyalleme ile ilgili sorunlardan olduğunu, bunu da GPS'le yani coğrafi sistemlerle, tabanlı sinyallerle ayarlayabileceklerini söyledi. Trenin gerçek zamanlı takip edilebileceğinden bahsetti. Önleyici bakım için bunun önemine işaret etti. Lojistikte mesela trenler uzun süreli hatta sürekli çalışıyorlar. Bunların herhangi bir sorun nedeniyle durdurulması da önemli kayıplara yol açıyor. 1 saatlik duruma işlem görememe 100.000 pound'a mal oluyor. Sensörler, IoT algoritmalar kullanarak bundan ilgili önleyici bakım geliştirilebilir. Trende veriyi alıp trende bu bilgiyi işleyip ne zaman bakıma gideceğini önceden kestirebilmek mümkün ve böyle bir uygulamayı zaten yaptıklarını ve bunun da demir yollarıyla ilgili ömrü %30 uzattığını özetledi. Genomla ilgili de geleceğin kişisel ilaç ya da kişisel tıbbi bakımıyla ilgili olarak da 2 kişi mesela aynı hastalığa ya da aynı yüksek tansiyona yakalandığı zaman ikisine aynı tedavi yerine genom analiziyle ikisine farklı tedaviler yapılmasından bahsetti. Örneğin Güney Asyalı kadınların kalp hastalığına eğilimi Avrupalı kadınlara oranla 7 kat olduğundan bahsetti. Ve şimdi genetik analizlerin son yıllar içinde maliyetlerinin çok aşırı düşmüş olması nedeniyle daha rahatlıkla daha fazla yapılabildiğini söyledi. Burada olay normalde gereğinden fazla verinin toplanıp işlenmesinde. Oysa genetikle ilgili ve %99 verinin belki daha bile fazlasının aynı kaldı. Önemli olan o değişen küçük kısmı yakalayabilir ve sadece onu işlemekle ilgili olduğunu söyledi. İşte uç analitiğinde de bunu yapabildiğinden bahsetti. Bu küçük kısmı veriyi makinenin üzerinde işlemek ve geri kalanını yok etmekten bahsetti. Genom verisinin büyüklüğünden söz ederken de 22 egzabit olduğunu, bunun karşılığında YouTube'un bunun yaklaşık 1/3'ünden daha az olduğundan bahsetti. Evet.
Thank you, Ashiq.
Okay, so originally I thought that I would present blockchain first and graph later, but I thought that we are in the tempo on the analytics side we can't do it. So I would be in between skipping a few slides if there is too much technology, but because we have to keep the interest of everyone alive. So if you have any questions that come up to discuss offline. So now everyone is talking about two things, a lot of data and artificial intelligence. But when we look at that how basically humans behave or how basically analytics work, it's never an individual thing. For example, if we are here, 20-30 people in this room, so we are connected to each other. We are connected to each other in some way actually. We are making a network. Is it right? That we are a part of a network. If we are using Facebook, Facebook is a part of, and we have a lot of friends. Friends make a network. If you are into basically logistics, for example, or how basically things move from one place to another, and a group of trucks or trains or lorries basically move, we make a network. So in reality, now this is what happening. 70 to 80% people do analytics, but they are doing individual analytics. But in reality, we are a network. So for example, I know Professor Osman, and you know basically him, and then some other people know you, and we are making a network. So in reality, if it's basically a social phenomenon or if it's basically a business phenomenon, this is what we basically work in the networks. And a graph is essentially a network. So what I am trying to make a case here is that I am not individual, I am part of a group. How groups or community are connected to each other, how we learn from each other, and then basically those networks, how those networks evolve from basically one point in time to another point in time. So this is basically, now I would further increase your interests. Facebook is an example of graph actually. Facebook is implementing similar technology. If you search Google, Google is exactly implementing this technology. If you have a Twitter, how basically Twitter suggests that, by the way, you should send a tweet or create a friend request to that, exactly that's the network. Because if I know one person and then that person is a large network, somehow I will get recommendations. So similarly, if you have a LinkedIn exactly this technology. So in future, all analytics would be network driven. It would be network that we learn. And in public this has been the history as well. In the last 100 years, let's suppose, how we learn from networks and communities and groups, and but this is the first time we have digitized the learning behavior. We have basically kind of used certain practices to formalize those groups. And then basically we said that, okay, it's not individual learning, it's a group learning. So I will be here explaining a few challenges in large-scale distributed network. I will be mentioning rail and transportation networks here. I will be mentioning again biological networks. I will be mentioning basically high-energy physics or scientific networks, and I will be mentioning some aspects of basically blockchain transactions. So, I will be doing more here, basically a more banking example. Then I will say how basically we could do scalable analytics as well as integration, and then we would basically mention scalability and how we could embed intelligence or artificial intelligence into individual basically graphs. So before I start, I should say what is a graph? So essentially a graph is a data structure, a way of structuring information to basically how people behave with each other. So how the nodes are related to each other. So for example, if you look at cities, for example, so this is a graph. So these are nodes, and these are basically a kind of edges of the node actually. So we would be saying is these nodes are known as vertices, and edges are known as edges obviously. So the combination is basically, we say that this makes a graph. Humans are nodes essentially, and the relationship between them are learners actually. We make a graph actually. So chemical properties, if you look at the individual atoms form molecules and the relationship between them, are essentially a graph actually. Web pages essentially, one web page is connected to another, another is connected to another. This is essentially a graph. So, for example, our brain actually, essentially how the individual neurons pass information, that's essentially a network. That's essentially a graph. So, and this is the reason. So, if you look at artificial intelligence, although we have just realized that this is a graph, but behind the scenes, AI learns from other sources and other sources learn from others. Eventually we make a graph actually. So everything that is connected has particular nodes and information flows between those nodes. We say it's a graph. Essentially it's a network, but a computer science name of a network, especially from an analytics perspective, it's a graph. So now, why graph analytics are gaining popularity in last 5 years, everything has changed actually. So because graph analytics are very fast. So if, for example, if I have to see that, I have to connect that person, for example, so I would have to basically find a lot of ways. But if it's part of the network, I would simply request Professor Ostron to basically tell me any person that has this characteristics. With one node, I would be able to scan everyone else. So this is a speed actually. So meaning basically is that, so essentially we could embed easily meaning. So semantics, for example, are relationships and answers. So for example, if we could see that this person could be linked to this person or this person or this person. If we have just information about one node, we basically find information about all other kind of communities. So similarly, we could basically, if we have one data set, we could easily transform it into a graph as well. So practically, if we have a lot of different data sets, one is logistics data sets, one is pesticides data sets, one is a kind of soil data sets, one is fertilizer data set, we could link it to see this is a graph, overall basically a graph of the whole crop, how the crop is behaving. So we could see that what is the impact of that particular fertilizer, or how the fertilizer is behaving as a change in particular soil level, as a result how the crops are basically behaving and how the productivity is behaving. So we would basically grow that graph. So 5 key drivers basically that have been helping the graph, the analytics are these basically, and this is the reason the graph analytics are becoming very powerful. So you could see that previously, everyone has used relational databases. Relational databases are, you have used MySQL or even, for example, MS Access to some on your computer. There is a database, small database known as MS Access actually. That's a relational database. So where basically, or someone has used MySQL, someone has used PostgreSQL, some of you may have used Oracle, for example. At least you would have heard these names. All these were relational databases. So, but you could see that relational databases, they have been static. Now, 90% analytics that people do based on relational databases, or 95% relational databases. So, what some would say that with the emergence of IoT, with the emergence of basically large-scale analytics or artificial intelligence, the relational databases would be dying. 5 years down the line, no one will be using them. So and on the other hand, you can see that graph databases are emerging, so they are basically moving up and down. So in 5 years down the line, everyone would be using graph database because we could easily find relationships, we could easily connect to each other, we could embed intelligence easily and they're scalable actually. So all these things basically, so now you could see that basically 10 years back, only graph database was new for them. But now you will see IBM, SAP, Amazon, name a company, even basically Facebook. So everyone is coming with basically graph databases because this is the way to do it. 10 years back, research was not mature, but now, for example, recently Azure is a Microsoft again. They have released Cosmo database, and Amazon has introduced a new database on Neptune. So now, even basically, you could simply push data, and they will create graph automatically out of that. So, and then you could see what is the relationship between those things. Previously, you had to physically or manually do it because databases do not support that. So, and previously, probably you know SQL, structured query language. So that was the way to basically pull. So if you have a database, it's a relational database, you have to pull something out. It's SQL database, what we say. The language that databases understand, it's known as SQL, structured query language. So the reason graph databases were not becoming popular because there was not a standard equal to SQL. So, and now fortunately there is a language known as cipher query language, CQL. So you simply need to understand one language, and it's simply just quite, in 10 minutes you would be able to understand actually. So it's not rocket science, but you would be able to browse basically any kind of relational data. Graph database. So now this is a little bit technical slide. I will be spending just half a minute. So in large scale systems, if it's a cloud, if it's a supercomputer, if it's any other thing. So there are three things that you should be aware of. One is consistency, if one is availability, one is partition tolerance. So what is, for example, consistency? If I ask that, consistency is that we should have one answer. For example, if I ask that, who is the youngest person in this room? If we have got three answers, it means the answer is not one. It's not a consistent answer. If it's so if there is one answer, so it means that that is a consistent answer. So obviously there are different types and shapes of consistency. We'll not be going into detail. Availability is that. So even if, for example, we put a partition and this group cannot talk to this group. So, but if still I ask the same questions, who is the youngest person, and get the same answer, I say my system is available. Okay. So partition tolerance is even basically we move into different rooms, and still basically I can still get the consistent answer. So I will be saying that my system is partition tolerance. Now, any large system, either it's a cloud or distributed system or HPC or supercomputer, they implement three principles. Now, CAP theorem says that no system on the earth could implement all three. You could only have two at the most. You could have, in any system, you could have basically two. So, if you have you are working in a bank. For bank, obviously, these two things are important actually. So, availability and consistency. So, now all these databases that support basically consistent availability, you could use one of the solutions. Now, if you are basically into a more logistics sector, for example, you don't need a consistency all the time actually. So you need availability and partition tolerance because your network, you are all the time on the network actually. So it means you should be supporting. If network goes down, your system should still be up and running actually. So if you are into a supermarket have hundreds of different stores. If one store cannot talk to another store for a minute, that's okay. So it means we need not need a consistency in the time being. So all databases are essentially, you can see the whole computer science is built around these three concepts. So if you understand this slide, it means in a minute you become computer experts. So now I simply introduce graphs, and now I'm quickly moving into basically application one. So there is a company known as Resume. Resume is all the scheduling in UK, train scheduling is done by Resume. So what we do is basically, now if there is a delay on a particular train, on a particular train station, that it means the whole of the train network gets affected. If for example the train I am traveling gets delayed by 1 minute, it would have an impact on all of the network. And it means there will be scheduling delays due to that delay. And just I mentioned earlier, that basically there are thousands of pounds. So recently the network rail was fined almost 600 million pounds more or less at the tune of 600 million pounds due to different delays. Delays could be due to network delays, due to infrastructure delays, due to train delays, due to scheduling delays, other reasons. Now the idea was that, so this is that the cost of delay is 110,000 pounds per minute. So per minute lost cost is basically 110 K. So, and there are basically 3.6 million hours per, delays per annum. And so it's obviously, so it's quite challenging and it's computer intensive. So obviously what they wanted to do is, how can we quickly measure the impact of incident? So incident is that if there is some accident and the train is delayed, how that basically would propagate and how can we minimize it. So okay, we could isolate a part of network and so the other trains don't have basically a kind of effective. So to understand, but the problem is, if you want to solve a problem, we need to understand the problem first. So it means that if we see that where the problem is and how to basically kind of cut down the propagation rate, so that eventually, if one train, for example, if there is a train station in close to London known as Reading, if that is basically become unavailable for half an hour, whole western route would become unavailable because it's more or less a kind of heart. All the trains pass through that. So what we said that you will not be able to do basically impact assessment until basically you could map. So essentially, if we don't know that how this is connected to this one and what is the route that's following, it would be difficult to basically kind of propagate the delays. So what we did was, so we got a data of all the train stations, mostly obviously on one particular route. So, and we try to start mapping this into a graph network. So, and then basically once we have the underlying infrastructure ready, then we could use machine learning. Machine learning is essentially artificial intelligence. So how can we then implement artificial intelligence on this network to see that if this node becomes unavailable, how is going to affect the traffic here? So, or if this basically becomes unavailable, how the train is moving from here to here, how it's going to behave actually. So, and the important thing is how can we minimize the disruption actually. And now, all of this is a train, but if you look at how transport networks work, how the logistics company work actually, exactly the same thing actually. So, if for example, if this a kind of lorry or truck or basically a kind of transport is delivering things here and this is further delivering, there is a dependence between them actually. So, and how to minimize it. So, at the end of the day, this is a train, but in reality, this is how basically the logistic systems work. This is conceptually the same way actually. So, now I will be going forward. So, how the trains are working is basically each train station is connected to other train station through a term known as berths. So, each train station does not stop on a train station. Train station has berths. Each train is associated to a particular berth. And when we create a route, it's not a route of train stations, it's a route of berths actually. So what we did is, so for example, this is a particular berth on a train station. So, and this is, so interestingly, so this is a train station close to London, Slough. So, and we say that these are basically two berths associated to that. So now we will see that the traffic coming from this side or this side. So for example, between these two berths, so traffic can move in both directions. But between this, it is only one way. Now there is no other database or no other way of basically representing this information other than a graph actually. So graph can basically enable us to kind of link the information. So if it was not graph, you cannot represent this information. So, and the model is simply scalable. You could add new kind of nodes whenever you need. So instead of 10 train stations, you could add a new train station. Now interestingly, so now we could see the services. Trains are basically, when we say this train service starts from Edinburgh and comes to London, for example. So, but then service is mapped onto particular berths. So now any berths that is, for example, we could say that between this berth to this berth, for example, 7 minutes and 24 seconds, for example, is the time. So if, for example, if the train is delayed here 2 seconds, we could immediately calculate the assessment. So that how this basically delay is going to propagate. Now we could see that if this is unavailable, so how can we use basically alternative routes to basically kind of get to the same destination. So this was one problem. So the second was basically mentioned that. I earlier mentioned that we humans are essentially. We have genomes. So and the genomes essentially, if you look at more kind of how we process data. So mostly in genomic center we are capturing VCF files. So VCF files is a way to how we process the data within genome actually. So it's some parts are machine readable, some are not machine readable. So and each basically a kind of VCF file is between you could say dozens of gigabytes. So and now when you basically do an analysis, you run a pipeline, you submit a pipeline, and basically if I want to see that, basically if I have a group of VCF files and I want to run some analysis, what analysis is that? Is this person having a cancer or not, for example? It would take 12 hours to basically run one a kind of pipeline. I would have to run many dozens of basically pipelines before I will be able to tell basically the person has a cancer or not. Now on the other hand, if basically what we do is, we have thousands of VCF files, but between each VCF file, here, this is one VCF file. You could see that if there is another file and there is another file, all the VCF files, 99.99% data will be common. 99.99% will be common. Why not we map this data onto basically a kind of a graph? And the graph basically we could see is, now we know that this is a particular gene, this is another gene, this is another gene, and so from here finding the gene was very difficult, but here if I compute once and put it to a computer, all the future analysis would become basically second. So you could only find that this particular gene is related to that particular kind of mutation, and that mutation will lead to that particular disorder. So data to graph actually, so finding individual mutations within basically large cancer graphs would become much more easier. The time it takes now 12 to 14 hours to process one basically group of VCF files, we were able to solve it in a few seconds actually. So, and due to only because now we have a different way of representing the data, so we could only basically do analytics. Now interestingly, a lot of people are doing artificial intelligence. I can tell you one thing, 80% times is data preparation, 20% time is AI. If we give garbage to AI, output would be garbage. So, and that's the reason basically a lot of people are basically now moving it. Yesterday I was reading an article. Now there are companies coming that are doing this data labeling and data representation. This is in human as well. If we bring in a child and start teaching basically wrong concepts, the person would go out and basically start writing wrong concepts as well. So algorithms are not different to children actually, the humans. Why certain kids misbehave, for example? Because they are in an environment and they are learning basically negative behaviors. And then when they are basically exposed to other people, they would be behaving the same actually. Algorithms are the same actually. So most algorithms misbehave because we are sending garbage data. So 80% is basically information. If we could produce right information, and we would be able to basically produce a very good outputs. And that's basically graphs are the fantastic way of representing the information so that we could build classical AI algorithms of that. So now how basically graph model would look like? So what we do is basically we have a VCF file and then we produce a graph a kind of model out of that. So for example, this is the graph model of FASTA file. FASTA file is a particular way to basically kind of do analysis. So now, if we want to see that basically you want to compare to, one is a healthy graph, another is basically there are mutations. So we know that these are 10 basically nodes and another 2, you could compare quite easily actually, and you will find the 1 or 2 nodes that misbehave. It would be much quicker, easier, efficient and quicker way of basically doing analysis. So just I said that, so for example, if these are individual kind of genes, we would map individual genes now. So this is one basically genome, this is another. Now, so maybe 99% between these basically individual files are common actually. But what people are doing right now is they run each analysis separately. The thing we could do is we could pull out all the relevant information and put together. So So now this is graph, for example, this is a graph of one cancer type, this graph another cancer type, this third graph, and now this is computed. So now whenever basically someone wants to search it, it would be searching a graph with a particular basically disease, and it would be basically 1 second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds basically information. On the other hand, if this information is not available and the person is directly coming to here, it had to each and every query, it would have to put the data together, it had to process each and every basically file and get the results, and by the time basically a kind of it's produced, it takes 12 to 14 hours. And this is the reason most of genome processing centers, they have supercomputers. Because due to representation problems, they did not spend the time to represent information, rather they were doing using brute force to basically kind of process it using different ways. So on the other hand, if they spend basically just small time to push their VCF files into a network, into a graph, it will make life easier. Now you would have seen new projects are coming both in London as well as in EMBL, European Molecular Biological Institute in Cambridge, Sanger. So they are creating their own graph models, and in the next 3 to 4 years, you would see basically getting benefit of they get this one.
Are we able to make comparisons as well with the genomes or the brain networks, as you said?
What?
Are we able to make comparisons of the
Absolutely, not a problem. So graph could be basically a kind of, you would cut the graph, take the pieces that you need, and basically visualize them the way.
I'm asking for due to the real technical problems as you mentioned, the delays and such, so they can create another tool for behind training, so that take the alternative tools.
Yeah, so I have slides of that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for example, so this was a kind of create the SQL file, and we try to present. So now it's, I mean, obviously you could color code them as well. So for example, if the person has a disease, so the disease would be having a different color than a normal kind of behavior. And graph, fantastic way to visualize as well. So the third the project that is getting it. Right. So we said 1 hour. In 30, I will finish. Okay. I will be I will be 20. So okay, so my target is to finish everything by 3:30. So I would be skipping few slides. And yeah. So the third project that we are doing with Sun is that they have 200 petabytes of data per year. They have the largest data so far. And if you look at, I mean, in scientific experiments, have you studied about standard model of physics, or if you are more into biology or chemistry, so obviously how the individual basically a kind of particle behaves. So so this is basically when the particle collides, they produce new particles, and this looks like this is a particular example of basically physics interactions. Now, so I mean, obviously, CERN has, for the time being, largest number of Nobel Prize holders. There are 28 Nobel Prize working right now in CERN actually. But still, since they were not computer scientists, they were doing it basically again 5-based analysis. So, so what we have done is basically we produce a kind of we process the CERN data. So we quickly, I will not be spending much time because we have understood the concept. So we process basically the CERN data, produce graph, and then started building basically artificial intelligence algorithms to process that data. So, and 2 or 3 basically team members are working on that. So we have developed a prototype. So idea is that when basically particle collides, they create new particles, and then those particles lead to another particles. So there is no way to basically build interactions without the graph model. So traditional databases basically they use statistical modeling, and it's a nightmare. And this is the reason you would have seen that, you know, who has the world's largest supercomputer or the grid network? CERN actually. They have 1 million nodes all around the world actually. And there are some Turkish universities part of the network as well. Simply there are 1 million plus basically computers to process the data. So, I will not be spending much time here. Yeah. Yeah. So this is it. So yeah. So here, another thing is that, for example, in this particular project, so we are working with a company, and the company has 100 plus sites, different parts of the world. Now, what they want to do is they want to bring all the data together. Okay. So and then basically probably know the FDA. FDA is an organization that kind of, I mean, if you want to release a drug, you have to basically get their certifications. So all the clinical trials are basically kind of properly regulated, and what are the output is basically then that is validated as well. So the clinical trials are going on in different parts of the world. Now, what the biostatistics guy who are working on the clinical trials, each or every few days they have to basically create a report and send it to FDA. That how the trial is doing, how the interventions are working. Now the data is coming all around the world. Now, if some here in Turkey changes the schema and uses a different database, and but the person who is sitting in basically Silicon Valley, so he would be getting a wrong view of the data. So it means that two different countries have two different data sets and they're not consistent actually. So consistency is a big problem in large-scale data centers. So now the person would be generating the report, it would be a wrong report going to FDA. So now that will be found or not, that's something else. But this is what happens. So, and if I change the schema, source schema, the report would have basically a catastrophic effects actually. And that's a big problem. So what we did was that we said that all of these data sets, again basically, so most of these things, for example, essentially the clinical trial name, the patient name, the drug name, the interventions, the outcomes. So essentially why not create a kind of notes out of that and basically create a clinical data warehouse so that all these things are basically as a graph actually. Now if something changes here, only one node would be changing instead of changing the whole thing. So it means that the person who are getting reports here, they will not be getting wrong reports. So the consistency of the large scale system is very, very important. So even you are working in 100+ countries, you have individual data sources, but when it comes to basically a central warehouse, this becomes one source of information. So there is no other way of achieving consistency. And this interesting thing is that since we know that graphs are scalable, so if these databases become 100 to 5,000, we would continue it. So the consistency would be scalable. So yeah, so I will be spending the 2 minutes before I move on to the next one because probably you are not interested in results or performance and all those things. So now, so what we do is we have a graph. We basically implement AI kind of artificial intelligence algorithms, and then we produce outcomes. So so this is basically what happens in artificial intelligence. So you have a lot of data. You run an algorithm, you produce results, you say that it's 60%, then we basically see a kind of run another time, it goes 62, then you keep on running so that you have to basically keep this loss as minimum and keep on updating weights actually, and until basically you get to the maximum level. But it's at least 200 times you have to run this before you get to a near optimal result. So the problem is you have to have a training data, and you will never have a training data. For example, if I ask you, do you have enough training data on a particular crop? Dr. Khalid was saying that whether there's a lot of data for the last 100 years, but for a particular disease or particular crop, you will not have enough data anytime. So, and something that's killing artificial intelligence is basically training data. So on particular disease, you will never have 1 million samples, for example, or on particular a kind of observation, you will never be having unlimited data. So a new class of kind of artificial intelligence is coming. That's known as reinforcement learning. So okay, we will learn from data, but at the same time, we will learn from people as well. So for example, we would get something from data, produce result, and show it to a doctor, for example. Doctor say yes and no. The doctor's yes and no becomes part of the data again, and basically it becomes a cyclic process. So obviously, I'm presenting a much simpler view of reinforcement learning. Interestingly, so mostly, for example, if you have seen robotics, for example, in robotics community, mostly the people are using reinforcement learning. It's not a one-off learning but you learn iteratively. You learn one thing, move on to next one, show the results, get feedback, and keep on learning. So and this is again an iterative process. So now the reinforcement learning or what we say is we say it's online learning. There are two types. Offline learning, you have all the data and produce result in one go. Online learning is when you are learning again and again. So my suggestion is, or my understanding is that offline learning would die, and eventually it would be online learning, where we basically learning is not one-step process. Learning is that you keep on learning, and this is what humans do actually. So we keep on learning, even if there is a very old person, the person would still be learning actually, because learning is an evolutionary process actually. I will simply skip. So what we have done is, we have basically, this is a big data environment. What we have used is, we have used a platform known as GraphX. So GraphX built on a tool known as Spark. Spark, what we do is, we push the data into memory, and then we use a GraphX to basically create a graph. So what will happen is that, now this graph stays in the memory, and we could process more as in real time actually. So this is the environment. So all the 4 or 5 experiments that I told you, this is the environment that we are using. So this again, one or two slides on the results. So this was the train, that email that we got from our train company. So we could say that model the graph between predictor and predict. These are two train stations. Remove one part and see the impact on the rest of the network, and give me the rest of the services that would be affected or impacted by the unavailability of the bird. And so tell me the stock and the services that would run on that particular route on that particular day. And tell us the crew that would basically be on those trains. And basically, essentially, this is, if you look at how the logistics work, this is not different than the logistics. Exactly the same thing you could apply it to logistics. Remove the word train and more or less basically we are into logistics. And as a bonus, tell me any services that are due to run on the adjacent lines, essentially, as these would, because if one line is unavailable, automatically the load would be on other lines, and those services would start affecting as well actually. So, and then what we said that, okay, then divide the problem. If this berth is unavailable, how is likely that the train will be 2 minutes delayed? How many trains will be 2 to 4 minutes? And how would it be more than 4 minutes? So, and this was basically, we created a configured matrix. We said that, okay, class 0 is between 2 to 4, sorry, 0 to 2, class 0.5 is between 2 to 4, and class 1 is between more than 4. So you could see that, our model was more or less basically within the range. So, in this particular case, actually, we only managed to do basically a kind of, so our first iteration was around 50%, 54%. So, sorry. So and in here case, basically, we started producing again, in this particular iteration, we were again close to 50%. But remember, this is one iteration. If our first iteration is 50%, you keep on doing it, like this reinforcement learning. So then we basically see the which are the services that we predicted directing on that particular time, which are the routes taken by a particular service, you basically find that. So which are, if the berth is removed, which are the services that would be affected, you could easily find it. So if the basically rolling stock, trains are known as rolling stock, anything that moves. Rolling stock gets stranded because of the berth. So what would the trains, what would the effect of that? So what are the possible different routes that you could take actually? So, and this is important, that the question you asked, what are the alternative routes service could take if the particular berth train station becomes unavailable? So, and so similarly, for example, you can see that I said now the same route remains the same, but a different application. So for example, what are the particular mutations? For example, if the person has a mutation, this particular color, you would see that actually. So if the person has a particular disease, that would be coming up a different color, and you could instantly browse that. So you could, the pharmacists would not be interested. So these are, we used it for ECG analysis. Basically, we capture different signals and use the same technique to see, can you predict basically a more as accurate signals of our heart basically beat. So, and so we managed to basically kind of forecast as well that basically, yeah. So, and this part is more or less the last slide on the graph side. I have 10 minutes. So I will be quickly moving to the blog sheet because I have to finish. Yeah. So. Yes, this is the third one. You asked this question on the trust side as well. So when you have a large distributed systems, and there are hundreds of thousands of different nodes, trust becomes an important issue. And at the same side, the government is interested in compliance, regulation. So for example, how can we ensure that what the systems are doing is implementing trust, or is government implementing regulations as well? So, and especially AI is becoming a key part, and humans are basically getting removed from the systems. How can we ensure that what the algorithms are producing is the right decision? Now, if something gets compromised, who is going to basically pay the price? So the blockchain essentially it came from Bitcoin, and it evolved from basically kind of digital currencies actually. So, but now it's basically finding a lot of different applications into banking, into finance, into a kind of even drug discovery, as well, especially supply chain actually. So supply chain is the biggest sector who is benefiting from blockchain actually. So for example, so I'm working with a company. I may not have time in 10 minutes, but I can explain the example. So the company is into packaging actually. They sell all the basically materials like this or bottles to basically superstores. So now the companies, for example, Marks and Spencer want to see that from where basically the material is coming, if it's ethically sourced. So if it's ethically sourced, because consumer is becoming due to waste, due to basically environment, all that, they're becoming very, very keen actually. So now if there is a blockchain, you can see, so I can easily see that from where basically this material came, from where it was produced, from where it was sold, from who quality assured it, and so no one can change that information because that's basically immutable information. So I will be using the word immutable. Immutable, it means we cannot change information what's in the system. And blockchain is a system where once we basically put the information, it cannot change. So yeah, the problem is so we all have basically digital transactions. So how do we all agree on history of digital transactions? So let's suppose if we decide on something, so what can we basically capture the history? And there was interesting kind of saying that he who controls the past controls the future. If we did not know what was happening basically in terms of transaction in the past, we will not be able to implement trust into the future as well. So having said that, blockchain is essentially a decentralized and a distributed. It's essentially a ledger where when we all doing the transactions, basically a kind of it's letting you basically a kind of enter the transactions. So that record cannot be altered. So once anything that is basically in a blockchain, it cannot be changed, it cannot be replaced, it cannot be edited. So blockchain is such a database that once anything comes in, it cannot be changed or edited or edited. So a blockchain is basically, essentially, less mutually distrusting entities. Basically, if for example there is a buyer, there is a vendor, and there is a supplier. So if basically they are sharing things with each other, so if there is a blockchain, so whatever is produced by the producer and it's supplied by the logistic company and comes to the basically buyer, if everything is basically in the blockchain, everyone can see right from the basically production to consumption. You will see all the steps, and no one can change the information. So yeah, so now this blockchain. So essentially, it's a way to manage trust. So let's suppose we want to enter a new a new node in a blockchain. Let's suppose, okay? And we are 5 people here who have the authority to basically add that record. Okay? Without blockchain, I could do it or you could do it. But if we have a blockchain, at least 3 of us would have to authorize the transaction. It's a majority. So yeah. So essentially, and that is known as a consensus. So consensus is that at least the 3 of 5 need to validate a transaction before it becomes a part of the blockchain, the block. But once it's there, it cannot be changed. It cannot be changed or altered. And let's suppose if you are into a clearing and settlement in a large bank, and there are thousands of basically a kind of transactions coming. Now, individual person is basically doing that. Any mistakes, basically, or if the person basically a kind of, if in a stock exchange or other areas, if some person misbehaves, so it means the whole kind of records becomes fake or faulty. And interestingly, if we have 5 people, all 5 would have a copy of the database. It means that any change happen in the database, all 5 would know actually the change has happened. It's not that basically a kind of, it's only one person is doing that. So, and majority of the nodes essentially, so that the blockchain network, so have to validate the transaction. So, yeah, so now, essentially, so blockchain is a tamper-proof. So tamper-proof is that once data has been entered, it cannot change at all. It's not that there are no intermediaries. If, for example, we have to do a transaction, there is no third person. So the third is innately secure. Everything is encrypted. Anything that goes in and comes out is basically encrypted. The fourth is it's a reconciled data. So it would only enter data when it's basically a one copy of the final decision. It's not basically intermediary. So I mentioned the word consistency. So the consistent information is that it's only one source of information. And the fifth one is basically they are the smart contracts. So for example, you know, when you're buying a house or selling a house, there are a lot of people. So there is a buyer, there is a seller, there are solicitors, there are banks, there are estate agents. Now, if all those people are basically kind of writing, so if instead of basically solicitor, we could have basically an algorithm. The algorithm checking the buyer's information and seller's information, and if this is there, then the transaction. That's known as smart contracts. So if basically, so that is basically very killer application for basically financial transactions or for basically a kind of business transactions. So because smart contracts. Now you will see a lot of companies. If in Silicon Valley you see where the most companies are coming, especially smart contracts. So now there are 4 elements in a blockchain. One is obviously distributed shared ledger. The ledger is a database that's shared and distributed. The second thing is privacy. So each and every transaction is private, essentially, or encrypted, I would say. Third is consensus. Any transaction that happens is basically subject to consensus. And the fourth is smart contracts, that algorithms are doing it. There is no human involved. So these are the 4 characteristics of any blockchain network. So, and I would simply skip it, the next 4. So, and there are 2 types of blockchain. One is on-chain data, where anything happen in the database, everyone knows. The off-chain is that only the basically, if the changes happen, the database should not know, but any transactions happen, you should know. So both basically, so there are 2 types of solution: on-chain blockchain and off-chain blockchain. So if you have a lot of data that has been captured in the past, you are not using on-chain because there is a lot of data. So now you could see that top banks, 14 of top 30 banks are basically engaged in blockchain proof of concepts. So these are the mostly banks that have already proof of concepts that use blockchain. So 21 of the 60 publicly regulated stock, future and option exchanges are getting distributed ledger technology or blockchain. So you could see that all the investment is happening. So basically, so most of the investment in the startups is happening in blockchains right now. Actually. So you could see that how basically the value of blockchain would be there with $3.3 trillion. So this is the government is basically a kind of So you could see that which are the emerging applications: e-commerce, global payments, remittance, P2P lending, microfinance, healthcare, title records, sporting records. So mentioned basically digital rights almost all the landscape of applications benefiting from the blockchain actually. I would simply, so for example, there were a lot of breaches in the data in healthcare, for example, and the blockchain is the perfect to basically kind of cut down. Now, essentially, now if you have all these data sources, blockchain can integrate all of these things and create a one story. So, in our whole lifetime, we are generating basically terabytes of data. For example, where I was born, I moved from one country to another country to another country, my data is basically fragmented. If I know basically what was the family history of my grandparents, I don't have no information because the data was not on the blockchain. And even if it was somewhere, it's basically tampered with the blockchain. So now basically this would be going to happen that we would be having a master patient index. Basically, we could see every person just like a passport. We would have a one digital identifier of health data, or our transactions, or banking information would be connected to that data. So this is one application that we are working on with the company, again a pharma company. So this is again IoT devices. So we could basically bring all those laboratory results, all that. So it's essentially when basically something happens. So all the blocks we could see that what happened to particular patients. So you had an X-ray, you went to a GP, you went to a hospital, you basically were diagnosed something. All the data you could basically retrospectively you could see basically. So, so for example, if I was part of the clinical trial and I want to share data with a pharma company, I could do it. Previously, there was no way to do it actually. So now, if my parents or my grandparents wanted to share their historical data with me, I know that there is a blockchain, so they would just give me a private key and I would give it to basically someone, or I could simply ask the hospital to give it to me basically. So, and this is basically clinical trial and compliance regulation essentially. So now if basically when the trials are happening, so first of all there are protocols, there are consent forms. So if we are putting all the information on the blockchain and FDA basically is looking into all those things, so we know that this cannot be changed. It means that, so whenever a trial is happening, we send truckloads of information. So whenever there is it takes basically, for example, there is a famous drug called Avastin, it's a cancer drug. It took basically almost 10 years to produce that drug, and it took basically $10 billion for Roche to basically produce that. So now, if it would have a blockchain, you could basically put all the information as the clinical trial is happening. So, and basically a kind of and FDA basically can see what's happening actually. So you could see kind of interactively how the data is coming. So these are the potential barriers. So and I would suggest here that I will stop. So these are different kind of platforms. There are certain issues. We have a paper by the way as well. So on this particular, so we did a lot of comparisons on the performance, scalability, security of different. So by the way, there are different consortium as well that are coming. So you will see there are 3 major consortium. By the way, all banks are major contributors to this technology. So and then a lot of companies are coming that are providing solutions to this one. And I will stop.